Cedar Falls was the kind of town where everyone knew your order at Marie's Diner before you sat down, and where the local sheriff spent more time helping with flat tires than solving crimes. Daniel Wheeler had found his peace here after the accident that changed his life 3 years ago, drawn to its quiet streets and the kind faces that never seemed to judge the wheelchair that had become his constant companion. On this particular Wednesday afternoon, Daniel guided his wheelchair down Main Street, nodding to Mrs. Peterson as she arranged flowers outside her shop. The late September breeze carried hints of autumn, rustling through the maple trees that gave Cedar Falls its name. His upper body strength had improved considerably over the past months of physical therapy, making the daily journey from his modest apartment to Marie's as natural as walking once had been. "The usual, sugar?" Marie called out as Daniel maneuvered through the diner's entrance, the familiar bell chiming above his head. Her silver hair was pulled back in its typical neat bun, and her smile carried the warmth of a dozen summer days. She didn't wait for his response before heading to the coffee pot, black with 1 sugar and a slice of her famous apple pie. "You're looking stronger today," she observed, setting down his order at his regular corner table. The spot gave him a clear view of both Main Street and the distant hills where Route 23 wound its way through dense forest. "Dr. Thompson's pushing me hard," Daniel replied with a slight grin. "Says I might even be ready for the wheelchair basketball league next month." He took a sip of his coffee, savoring the familiar taste of home. Through the window, Daniel caught sight of something unusual, a group of motorcycles rumbling past, their chrome pipes gleaming in the afternoon sun. They weren't locals. Their leather cuts bore unfamiliar patches, and their bikes carried the dust of long-distance travel. 3 riders in particular caught his attention, massive men with hard eyes that seemed to take measure of everything they passed. "New faces in town," Marie murmured, her tone carrying a hint of concern. "Been seeing more of them lately, especially since they opened that old warehouse out on Miller's Road. Sheriff Morgan says they keep to themselves, but..." She trailed off, watching as another group of bikers roared past. Daniel studied the riders as they accelerated away, their engines echoing off the brick buildings. Cedar Falls had always been a peaceful town, where people left their doors unlocked and neighbors looked out for each other. But lately, there had been whispers of change, subtle shifts in the town's rhythm that felt like the first droplets before a storm. As he prepared to leave for his physical therapy session, Daniel thought of his brother Ethan, wondering what the decorated Navy SEAL would make of these new visitors to their hometown. They'd always been close, even after Ethan's military career took him around the world. The last time they'd spoken, Ethan had mentioned being stationed nearby for specialized training, though nearby, in SEAL terms, could mean anywhere within a few hundred miles. "You be careful out there," Marie called as Daniel wheeled toward the door. "Something about those fellows doesn't sit right with me." Daniel nodded, straightening his posture as he remembered his brother's words. Head high, shoulders back, eyes forward. Whatever changes were coming to Cedar Falls, Daniel Wheeler would face them the same way he faced everything else, with dignity, strength, and an unwavering spirit. The convenience store on Miller's Road wasn't Daniel's usual choice, but Dr. Thompson had recommended a specific brand of protein powder, and Jensen's was the only place in Cedar Falls that carried it. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot as Daniel wheeled himself toward the entrance, his gym bag slung across the back of his chair. The rumble of motorcycles caught his attention before he reached the door. 3 bikes pulled into the lot, their engines unnecessarily loud in the quiet afternoon. Daniel recognized them from earlier, the same hard-eyed riders who'd passed Marie's Diner. Their leather cuts identified them as members of something called the Steel Reapers. The largest of the 3, a heavily tattooed man with a graying beard, dismounted first. His cut identified him as Razor. He nudged one of his companions, jerking his head in Daniel's direction with a smirk that made Daniel's stomach tighten. "Well, look what we got here, boys," Razor drawled, deliberately stepping into Daniel's path. "Ain't this just the most inclusive little town you ever seen?" Daniel kept his expression neutral, trying to wheel around them. "Excuse me," he said firmly. "I need to get inside." The second biker, younger with a shaved head, moved to block his path. "What's your hurry, Wheels? Maybe we want to have a friendly conversation." His tone suggested anything but friendliness. Inside the store, Mr. Jensen watched through the window, his hand hovering near the phone. A few other customers had stopped what they were doing, attention drawn to the scene unfolding in the parking lot. "Look," Daniel said, meeting Razor's gaze steadily. "I don't want any trouble. I'm just here to shop." Razor squatted down, bringing himself eye level with Daniel. His breath smelled of cigarettes and something stronger. "That's funny, because trouble seems to have a way of finding folks who don't know their place." He glanced at his companions. "Maybe we should show him how stairs work." Daniel's hands tightened on his wheels, his heart pounding but his voice remaining calm. "My place? And where exactly would that be?" "Somewhere less visible," Razor sneered. "This here's becoming our town, and we got certain standards to maintain." He reached out to grab Daniel's chair. The store's door chimed. Mr. Jensen emerged, his ancient shotgun pointed at the ground but clearly visible. "Everything all right out here, Daniel?" His voice wavered slightly, but his grip on the weapon was steady. Razor straightened slowly, his eyes narrowing at the shotgun. After a tense moment, he smiled, a cold, promising expression. "We were just leaving, but we'll be seeing you around, Wheels. Count on it." The bikers mounted up, engines roaring to life. As they pulled away, Razor called back, "Better watch yourself. Not everyone in this town's gonna be around to help you all the time." Daniel let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "Thanks, Mr. Jensen." The old shopkeeper shook his head. "Don't mention it. But Daniel? Those aren't men to mess with. Maybe you should call that brother of yours. Let him know what's happening in Cedar Falls." Daniel watched the bikes disappear around the corner, Razor's threat echoing in his mind. Maybe Mr. Jensen was right. Maybe it was time to make that call. Back in his apartment, Daniel sat in the gathering darkness, his phone in his hand. The protein powder he'd bought sat unopened on the kitchen counter, a reminder of the afternoon's confrontation. He'd spent the last hour debating whether to make this call, torn between his desire to handle things himself and the growing certainty that Cedar Falls was changing in dangerous ways. Finally, he dialed. The phone rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered. "Hey, little brother!" Despite the static on the line, Ethan's voice carried its usual calm confidence. "Everything okay?" Daniel smiled despite himself. Ethan had always been able to read him, even through a simple greeting. "Just checking in. How's the training going?" "Same old, teaching some fresh faces how to survive." There was a pause. "But you didn't call to hear about that. What's wrong?" Running his hand along the wheel of his chair, Daniel thought about the incident at Jensen's. "Remember how I ended up in this chair? That drunk driver who thought being tough meant pushing people around?" "Daniel," Ethan's voice hardened. "What happened?" "We've got some new residents in Cedar Falls. Bikers. They're set up in that old warehouse on Miller's Road." Daniel described the encounter, trying to keep his voice steady. "Their leader calls himself Razor. He made it pretty clear they don't think someone in a wheelchair belongs in their town." The line went quiet for a moment. When Ethan spoke again, his voice carried the controlled tension Daniel recognized from their childhood, the tone that usually preceded someone deeply regretting their choices. "3 years ago, I wasn't there when you needed me," Ethan said quietly. "I was halfway around the world when that driver hit you. Do you know how many times I've replayed that night, wishing I could have changed things?" "Eth, that wasn't your fault. You were serving our country." "Maybe, but I'm not halfway around the world now. I'm about 2 hours north, and my training rotation ends tomorrow." There was a rustling sound, like papers being moved. "I think it's time I came home for a visit." Daniel gripped the phone tighter. "These guys aren't just weekend warriors, Ethan. Mr. Jensen says they've been causing trouble all over town. Sheriff Morgan can't seem to touch them." A low chuckle came through the line. "Little brother, I've dealt with worse than some wannabe tough guys on bikes. 10 years with the SEALs teaches you a few things about handling bullies." I don't want anyone getting hurt, Daniel said. Not even them. Trust me, Ethan replied, and Daniel could hear the smile in his voice. Sometimes the best way to prevent violence is to show people exactly why they shouldn't start it. I'll be there tomorrow afternoon. After hanging up, Daniel wheeled to his window, looking out at the darkened streets of Cedar Falls. Tomorrow would bring changes. He could feel it. The question was whether those changes would heal his hometown or tear it apart. News traveled fast in Cedar Falls. By morning, word of the confrontation at Jensen's had spread through town like wildfire. Daniel noticed the changes as he made his way to Marie's. Worried glances, hushed conversations that stopped when he approached, and an unusual number of empty parking spots along Main Street. Sheriff Morgan's patrol car was parked outside the diner. The sheriff himself sat at the counter, his coffee growing cold as he spoke in low tones with Marie. Both looked up when Daniel entered. "Daniel," Morgan nodded, his weathered face grave. "Got a minute? Jensen called you?" Daniel positioned his chair at the counter. "He did, but that's not all." Morgan ran a hand through his graying hair. "The Steel Reapers aren't just passing through. They've bought that warehouse outright, and more of them are showing up every day. This morning, the bakery found their windows soaked up. Last night, the gas station reported customers filling up and riding off without paying." Marie placed a coffee in front of Daniel. Her usual cheerfulness dimmed. "They were in here earlier, 5 of them. Ran up a tab and told me to put it on their protection account." Her hands trembled slightly. "Said all businesses in their territory need to contribute." "Protection account?" Daniel's stomach tightened. "That's extortion. Can't you arrest them, Sheriff?" Morgan's face darkened. "Need evidence that'll stick. These guys are organized, smart about staying just inside the law, and folks are scared to testify." He leaned closer. "Word is they've got connections in 3 states. My deputy spotted their cuts at some recent crime scenes up north." The diner's door chimed. 2 Steel Reapers walked in, including the shaved-head younger one from yesterday. Conversations died. A family with small children quickly paid their bill and left. "Well, if it ain't our friend from the parking lot," the biker sneered. "Sheriff, you should invest in some ramps around town. Make it more accessible for our wheelchair-bound buddy here." Morgan turned slowly. "That sounded like a threat, son." "Just showing concern for our community," the biker replied with a cold smile. "Speaking of community, Marie, we'll need that payment by Friday. Wouldn't want any accidents in your nice establishment." Daniel's hands gripped his wheels, but Morgan subtly shook his head. "Not here, not now." After the bikers left, Morgan's radio crackled. More trouble at the warehouse. Suspicious vehicles coming and going at all hours. The sheriff stood, leaving money for his coffee. "Daniel," he said quietly, "I heard your brother's coming home. Former SEAL, right?" When Daniel nodded, Morgan continued. "Good, because I've got a feeling things are going to get worse before they get better." Outside, more motorcycles roared past, their engines drowning out the usual peaceful sounds of Cedar Falls. Daniel thought about Ethan's imminent arrival and found himself hoping his brother's training had prepared him for whatever the Steel Reapers were planning. Ethan Wheeler didn't announce his arrival with roaring engines or flashy displays. Instead, his dark blue pickup rolled quietly into Cedar Falls just after noon. Its military-neat appearance a stark contrast to the dust-covered bikes that now seemed to be everywhere. He parked outside Daniel's apartment building, his trained eyes automatically scanning the street before he stepped out. At 6'2", with the lean, efficient muscle of a career SEAL, Ethan moved with the fluid grace of someone who understood violence but chose control. His short-cropped hair and clean-shaven face might have made him look ordinary, if not for the alertness in his eyes. The kind of awareness that came from years of operating in the world's most dangerous places. Daniel was waiting at the window, and Ethan felt a familiar pang seeing his brother in the wheelchair. He pushed it aside quickly. Daniel had never wanted pity, especially from him. "You made good time," Daniel said as he opened the door, leading his brother inside. Traffic was light. Ethan set his duffel bag down, his gaze taking in details most would miss. The slight wear on Daniel's wheel grips, the new calluses on his hands. You've been hitting the gym hard. Trying to stay ready. Daniel wheeled to the kitchen. Coffee? Please. Ethan moved to the window, watching a group of steel reapers cruise past. I counted 6 bikes on my way in, all wearing the same cuts, all carrying concealed. He turned to his brother. Tell me everything. As Daniel described the recent events, Ethan listened without interrupting, his expression unchanging. Only someone who knew him well would notice the slight tension in his jaw, the way his fingers occasionally flexed. And the sheriff? He asked finally. Morgan's good people, but overwhelmed. He knows something bigger is happening at that warehouse, but can't prove it. Ethan nodded slowly. During my last deployment, we tracked a smuggling ring operating through seemingly legitimate businesses. They'd move into small towns, establish a presence through intimidation, then use the location as a distribution hub. His eyes met Daniel's. The patterns here feel similar. A motorcycle's roar interrupted them, louder than necessary, deliberately provocative. Ethan moved to the window again, watching Razor and 3 others park across the street. The gang leader looked up directly at Daniel's apartment, his message clear. We know you're here. They're trying to bait us, Daniel said quietly. I know. Ethan's voice was calm, but Daniel recognized the tone. It was the same one he'd used years ago, just before dealing with bullies who targeted his younger brother in school. But we're going to handle this smart. First, I need to see their operation for myself. Ethan. Trust me, little brother. Ethan squeezed Daniel's shoulder. I didn't spend 10 years in the teams without learning how to gather intel. By tonight, we'll know exactly what we're dealing with. Marie's diner had always been busiest at dinner time, but tonight only 3 tables were occupied. Ethan sat across from Daniel in the corner booth, his back to the wall, positioning that gave him a clear view of both entrances. Old habits died hard. Place used to be packed, Daniel said, watching Marie serve coffee with less of her usual spark. Now, people are afraid to go out after dark. Ethan nodded, noting the fresh scratch marks on the diner's front door, another warning from the Steel Reapers. Tell me about their patterns. Times, numbers, regular spots. They're usually in groups of 3 to 6. Razor leads most runs, but there's another guy, calls himself Viper, who handles their business meetings. Suits show up at the warehouse sometimes, never stay long. A teenage waitress approached their table nervously. Marie wanted me to tell you, those men are coming. They usually show up around this time. Thank you, Sarah, Daniel said gently. You should head home early tonight. Ethan watched the girl hurry away. How many businesses have they threatened? Most of Main Street. Jensen's fighting back, but he's about the only one. The bakery's talking about closing for good. Daniel leaned forward. What are you thinking? Before Ethan could answer, 3 motorcycles pulled up outside. Razor entered first, followed by Viper, a leaner man with cold, calculating eyes, and the shaved-head younger biker. They paused at the entrance, taking in the scene until Viper spotted the brothers. Well, Viper drawled, leading his group to the adjacent booth. Looks like our wheelchair warrior has some company. Military, by the look of him. Ethan continued eating, his movements deliberate and unhurried. Only Daniel recognized the coiled tension in his brother's shoulders. You boys enjoying our town? Razor called over. Nice place, ain't it? Getting nicer every day, under the right management. Interesting definition of nice, Ethan replied, his voice level. Where I come from, nice doesn't usually involve threatening teenage waitresses. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Viper leaned forward, studying Ethan with new interest. And where exactly do you come from, friend? Originally, right here, recently, places where people like you learn expensive lessons about choosing the wrong targets. Razor started to rise, but Viper held up a hand. Now, we're all friends here. Just having dinner, right? His smile never reached his eyes. But you should know, friend, this isn't some foreign battlefield. This is home. Different rules apply. Only rule that matters, Ethan said quietly, is that you don't touch my brother or this town. Consider that a professional courtesy. Professional, huh? Viper stood, dropping cash on his table. We'll remember that. Come on, boys. Let's give the family some privacy. For now. After they left, Daniel released a breath. That could have gone worse. It's not over, Ethan said, watching the bikers through the window. But now we know something important. What's that? They're not just thugs. That Viper, he's ex-military. Probably special operations. Which means whatever they're running out of that warehouse, it's bigger than we thought. The local market sat at Cedar Falls' busiest intersection. Its morning crowd usually a mix of families and elderly shoppers. Today, though, most people hurried past, eyes down, as 4 steel reapers lounged against their bikes near the entrance. Daniel and Ethan approached from the side street, ignoring the bikers' stares. We don't have to do this, Daniel said quietly. Yes, we do. Ethan kept pace beside his brother's wheelchair. They need to learn they can't control where people shop. The younger biker, Snake, they'd learned his name was, pushed off his motorcycle. Look who's back for more entertainment. He stepped directly into Daniel's path, forcing him to stop. Brought your bodyguard again, Wheels? Ethan moved with fluid grace, positioning himself between Snake and his brother. Step aside. Or what, soldier boy? Snake's hand drifted toward his jacket. This ain't your kind of... The movement was almost too fast to follow. Ethan's hand locked around Snake's wrist, turning it slightly. Not enough to break, just enough to send white-hot pain shooting up the biker's arm. Snake dropped to one knee, gasping. That hand was reaching for a knife, Ethan said calmly. Want to rethink that decision? The other bikers started forward, but a sharp voice cut through the tension. Stand down. Viper emerged from the market, taking in the scene with those calculating eyes. Let them go. Ethan released Snake, who scrambled back, cradling his wrist. But Viper wasn't finished. Impressive technique, he said, studying Ethan. That's advanced close-quarters combat. SEAL team? Does it matter? It might. Viper's smile was razor-thin. You know, we could use someone with your skills. Pays good, hours are flexible. Better than whatever the government's giving you. Not interested. No? Viper shrugged. Shame. Because this town's changing, whether you like it or not. Smart folks are choosing sides. Already chose mine, Ethan's voice hardened. And if any of your people pull weapons again, they won't get off with just a wrist lock. Viper's eyes narrowed. Careful, SEAL. Threats like that could be bad for your brother's health. That wasn't a threat. Ethan stepped closer, his voice dropping so only Viper could hear. That was a professional explaining workplace safety. Next time one of yours reaches for a weapon, I'll assume they're serious about using it. Then we'll see who's really prepared for violence. For a moment, the two men locked eyes. Then Viper laughed, a cold, empty sound. Come on, boys. Let our friends do their shopping. As they mounted their bikes, he called back. But remember, SEAL, you can't be everywhere at once. Inside the market, Daniel released a tense breath. That could have gone bad fast. It still might. Ethan watched the bikers roar away. But now they know we're serious. And I know something else. Viper's definitely ex-military. The way he read that wrist lock, the terms he used, he's had serious training. Which means? Which means, Ethan said grimly, we need to find out what's in that warehouse. Tonight, Sheriff Morgan's cruiser sat hidden behind Coulter's abandoned feed store, half a mile from the warehouse. He killed the engine, turning to face Ethan in the passenger seat. You sure about this? If they catch you snooping around? They won't. Ethan checked his phone. No messages from Daniel, who was safely at home. Just keep your radio handy. The warehouse loomed against the darkening sky. its rusted walls and broken windows masking recent security upgrades, new locks, motion sensors, and cameras that Ethan had spotted during his earlier drive-by. 2 bikers patrolled the perimeter, while 3 more guarded the main entrance. "They're running 3-man rotations," Morgan observed. "Professional setup." "Military precision," Ethan agreed. "Viper's background is showing, but they've got blind spots. All teams do." Morgan handed him a digital camera. "Get what you can, but don't take unnecessary risks. These guys..." "I know." Ethan slipped into the shadows. "Give me 30 minutes. He moved like a ghost through the surrounding woods, using the skills honed through countless missions. The warehouse's east side had the weakest coverage, only 1 camera, with a 3-second blind spot between sweeps. Timing his approach, Ethan reached the wall undetected. A partially broken window, 15 feet up, offered a view inside. Using a stack of old crates, Ethan climbed silently, finding a stable position to observe and photograph the interior. What he saw confirmed his worst suspicions. The warehouse floor had been converted into a sophisticated operation. Workers, not bikers, but professionals in plain clothes, were packing crates at organized stations. Through his zoom lens, Ethan caught glimpses of the contents, weapons, drugs, and what looked like forged documents. "Impressive setup, isn't it?" The quiet voice below made Ethan freeze. Viper stood in the shadows alone, looking up. "You can come down now. Slowly." Ethan weighed his options. No backup, multiple hostiles inside, and Viper had probably already alerted his men. "If I wanted you dead," Viper continued, "you would be. Just want to talk." Ethan descended, keeping his movements controlled. Nice operation. Weapons, drugs, forgeries, hitting all the highlights. Barely scratched the surface. Viper's smile was cold. "Last chance to join up. Someone with your skills could write their own ticket." "Not interested in tickets to prison." "Prison?" Viper chuckled. "We've got protection. Federal badges look the other way. Local cops can't touch us. It's a new world, SEAL. Better to be on the winning side." "There's always someone bigger," Ethan replied. "Always someone who can't be bought." "Maybe." Viper stepped back. "You've got 5 minutes to clear out. Next time won't be friendly." Ethan walked away slowly, feeling Viper's eyes on him. Once clear, he sprinted back to Morgan's cruiser. "Got what we need?" the sheriff asked. "More than enough." Ethan showed him the photos. "But we've got a bigger problem. They've got law enforcement protection. Someone high up is on their payroll." Morgan's face hardened. "Then we need to be very careful who we trust with this." Midnight cast deep shadows around the warehouse as Ethan moved through the surrounding woods. Despite Viper's warning, he had to know more. The photos he'd taken earlier showed something in the background, shipping manifests with federal seals. If the Steel Reapers had government connections, they needed proof. He'd left Daniel at Sheriff Morgan's house, safer under watch. The memory of Viper's threat about his brother's health still burned in his mind, driving him forward despite the risk. Using the maintenance schedule he'd memorized during his earlier reconnaissance, Ethan timed his approach between guard rotations. The Steel Reapers were good, but they still followed patterns. Military habits died hard, even among criminals. A guard passed, keys jingling at his belt. Ethan waited, counting seconds. 3 minutes until the next patrol. He moved fast, using the guard's own key marks in the dust to identify the correct one for the side door. Inside, he pressed against the wall, letting his eyes adjust. The warehouse's interior had changed since earlier. More crates were stacked near the loading dock, and a group of men in suits clustered around a table covered in documents. Through his night vision monocular, Ethan could make out federal badges on their belts. "Shipment needs to clear customs by Thursday," one suit was saying. "The senator's office is asking questions." "Not our problem," another replied. "Viper assured us." A door slammed somewhere above. Ethan melted into the shadows as footsteps approached on the metal catwalk. Viper's voice drifted down. "Our friend came back for another look." He sounded amused. just like I said he would." Ethan's pulse quickened. They'd been expecting him. But why let him get this far? "Take him," Viper ordered. "Alive. He needs to understand the consequences of refusing our offer." Guards emerged from multiple directions, moving with tactical precision. These weren't ordinary bikers. Their movements showed special operations training. Ethan counted 6, all armed with suppressed weapons. He had seconds to decide. The loading dock was 30 feet away. Between him and freedom stood half a dozen trained killers. Above, Viper watched like a chess master anticipating checkmate. The first guard rounded the corner, weapon raised. Ethan moved. Years of SEAL training took over as he disarmed the man silently, using his body as a shield against the others. A quick strike to the temple and the guard dropped unconscious. 2 more approached from opposite sides. Ethan rolled, letting them tangle with each other before taking both down with precise strikes. But more were coming. "Impressive," Viper called from above, "but pointless. Even if you escape, we own this town, and your brother can't hide forever." Ethan's response was to throw the unconscious guard's flashlight through a window. Glass shattered, setting off perimeter alarms. In the confusion, he slipped through the loading dock, disappearing into the darkness. Behind him, Viper's laugh echoed. "Run, SEAL. But remember, you just made this personal." Ethan ran, not from fear, but from calculation. He had what he needed, proof of federal agents working with criminals. Now he just had to figure out how to use it without getting Daniel killed. Dawn found Ethan, Daniel, and Sheriff Morgan gathered in the station's back office, reviewing evidence spread across a worn desk. Photos from the warehouse showed federal agents meeting with criminals, while shipping manifests hinted at massive weapons shipments. "This goes higher than I thought," Morgan said, running a hand through his gray hair. "Corrupt federal agents, possible senator involvement. We're in dangerous territory." "Which is exactly why they chose Cedar Falls," Ethan replied, sorting through documents. "Small town, limited law enforcement resources, perfect cover for their operation. Who'd look for major weapons trafficking here?" Daniel wheeled closer to the desk, examining a photo. "These shipping routes. They're using the old mining roads to avoid checkpoints. That's why they needed this location." "Smart," Ethan nodded. "Remote enough to operate quietly, but close to major transport routes. Viper's running a sophisticated operation." Morgan's radio crackled with a deputy's voice. "Sheriff, we've got trouble at Marie's. Steel Reapers are tearing up the place." "They're sending a message," Daniel said quietly, "because of what you saw last night." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Morgan, how many deputies can you trust? Completely trust?" 4, maybe 5. The rest are too scared or already bought. "Get them here, now." Ethan pulled out his phone. "I've got a contact in the FBI's anti-corruption task force, someone who can't be bought. But we need to move fast before Viper realizes we're building a case." "What about Daniel?" Morgan asked. "They'll target him to get to you." "I'm not hiding," Daniel insisted. "This is my town too, and I'm tired of watching them destroy it." Ethan studied his brother's determined expression. "No hiding," he agreed, "but we do this smart. Morgan, your deputies can protect the town's key points. My FBI contact can bring in clean agents to handle the federal side. But Viper's crew, the ex-military ones, they're mine." "You can't take them alone," Daniel protested. "He won't have to." Morgan pulled out his service weapon, checking it with practiced hands. "I've spent 30 years protecting this town. I'm not stopping now." Ethan's phone buzzed, a text from his FBI contact. "Task force can be here in 4 hours, but we've got another problem. My contact says there's chatter about a major shipment coming in tonight. Weapons-grade stuff." "They're accelerating their timeline," Morgan said, "because they know we're onto them. Then we accelerate ours." Ethan stood, his decision made. "Morgan, get your deputies. Daniel, I need you to coordinate from here. You know the town better than anyone. We've got 4 hours to set up our response before the FBI arrives." "And what if Viper moves before then?" Daniel asked. Ethan's expression hardened. Then we remind him that he's not the only one with special operations training. Sometimes you have to fight fire with fire. Just be careful, Daniel said quietly. These aren't terrorists in some foreign country. This is home. Exactly, Ethan replied. Which is why we can't lose. Daniel was alone when they came for him. He'd insisted on making the short trip from the sheriff's station to the pharmacy himself, not wanting to tie up any of Morgan's deputies. Now, as 3 Steel Reapers blocked his path in the empty parking lot, he realized his mistake. Razor stepped forward, flanked by Snake and a massive biker Daniel hadn't seen before. Their leather cuts gleamed dully in the afternoon sun, patches marking them as enforcers within the gang. "Your brother's been causing trouble," Razor said, his voice carrying false concern. "Making poor choices. Maybe you can help him see reason." Daniel's hands tightened on his wheels. "If you're trying to send a message, why don't you deliver it to Ethan yourself?" "Oh, this is the message." Razor smiled coldly. "See, Viper thinks your brother needs motivation to accept our generous offer. And what better motivation than his crippled little brother?" The massive biker moved behind Daniel's wheelchair while Snake pulled out a phone, clearly ready to record whatever came next. Daniel's heart pounded, but he kept his voice steady. "You do this. There's no going back. Ethan won't stop until he takes you all down." "That's the point, Wheels!" Razor cracked his knuckles. "By the time we're done, your brother will beg to join us just to keep you safe." A car door slammed nearby. Mrs. Peterson from the flower shop emerged from her van, grocery bags in hand. She froze at the scene before her. "Get back in your car and leave!" Razor barked at her. "This isn't your business." But Mrs. Peterson stood her ground. "Daniel, are you all right, dear?" More car doors opened. The pharmacy's elderly pharmacist stepped out, followed by 2 construction workers from the site down the street. They moved to flank Daniel, forming a protective circle. "Think carefully," the pharmacist said, his weathered voice firm. "This young man has friends here." Snake shifted nervously. "Razor, we got company." More townspeople were emerging from shops, drawn by the confrontation. Daniel saw determination in their faces, replacing the fear that had gripped Cedar Falls since the Steel Reapers arrived. Razor's face darkened. "You people don't want to interfere? This isn't your fight." "That's where you're wrong," Mrs. Peterson replied. "This is our town. Daniel is one of us, and we're done being afraid." The massive biker released Daniel's wheelchair, stepping back. Even Razor seemed unsure, facing the growing crowd of angry residents. "This isn't over," he snarled at Daniel. "Tell your brother, tonight's shipment is his last chance to make the right choice." As the bikers mounted up and roared away, Mrs. Peterson placed a gentle hand on Daniel's shoulder. "Are you all right?" Daniel nodded, emotion tightening his throat. "Thank you, all of you. But they'll be back." "Then we'll be ready," the pharmacist said firmly. "It's time Cedar Falls stood up for itself." Daniel pulled out his phone to call Ethan. The Steel Reapers had just made a crucial mistake. They'd shown that fear was their only real weapon, and Cedar Falls wasn't afraid anymore. Word of the parking lot confrontation spread through Cedar Falls like wildfire. By late afternoon, Marie's Diner had become an impromptu command center filled with determined townspeople ready to take back their community. Daniel sat near the counter, Ethan and Sheriff Morgan beside him, as locals crowded in with information and offers of help. "The hardware store's been tracking their deliveries," Mr. Jenkins reported, spreading a handwritten log on the counter. "Big trucks, always at night, using the old mining roads, just like you said." Marie poured coffee for everyone, her movements energetic, fear replaced by purpose. "They tried to shake us down, but we're done paying. Every business on Main Street agrees. No more protection money." "They won't take that lying down," Morgan warned, but his eyes showed pride in his townspeople. Ethan studied the delivery logs. "This matches our intel about tonight's shipment. They're moving something big, bigger than usual." "Got more news," Jensen called from the door, his shotgun now a constant companion. My cousin at the state police says unmarked vehicles have been spotted heading this way. Fancy government types? That'll be my FBI contact, Ethan said. But Viper's federal friends might show up too. We need to be ready for both. Daniel wheeled to the diner's window, watching more townspeople arrive. The construction crew from earlier had parked their trucks strategically around Main Street. The high school wrestling coach was organizing young men into patrol groups. Even Mrs. Peterson was coordinating communication chains between neighborhoods. This is what they didn't count on, Daniel said quietly. They thought they could own this town through fear. But they didn't understand Cedar Falls. Morgan's radio crackled. Sheriff, multiple bikes heading toward the warehouse. Looks like they're calling in reinforcements. They're spooked, Ethan observed. Viper knows the town turning against them threatens his whole operation. He'll try to force that shipment through tonight, before the FBI arrives. Then we need to slow them down, Daniel said. Buy time for the task force to get here. The diner's door chimed as more locals entered. Farmers with trucks, mechanics with tools, teachers, shopkeepers, all looking to help. The fear that had gripped Cedar Falls was transforming into something else: determination. Listen up, Morgan addressed the crowd. What we're doing is dangerous. These men are killers, and they've got corrupt officials backing them. Anyone who wants to back out, now's the time. Not a single person moved toward the door. All right then. Ethan stood, command presence natural as he faced the volunteers. We've got 2 hours until that shipment arrives. Let's show them what happens when they pick the wrong town. Outside, the sun was setting on Cedar Falls. But for the first time since the Steel Reapers arrived, darkness didn't bring fear. Tonight, it brought resolve. Moonlight cast long shadows around the warehouse as Ethan checked his watch. The FBI task force was in position, their vehicles hidden along the mining roads. Sheriff Morgan's deputies and trusted townspeople had created a perimeter, blocking potential escape routes with trucks and farm equipment. Convoy spotted on Miller's Road, Daniel's voice came through Ethan's earpiece from his coordination position at the sheriff's station. 3 trucks, heavy escort. Copy that, Ethan signaled to the FBI team leader. Through his night vision scope, he could see increased activity around the warehouse. Steel Reapers mounting up, weapons being distributed. Viper was taking no chances with this shipment. The first truck rounded the bend, its headlights sweeping the area. Behind it, motorcycles flanked the convoy like honor guards. Ethan counted 20 bikes, plus the corrupt federal agents' vehicles parked inside the compound. All units hold, the FBI leader ordered. Wait for them to begin unloading. The trucks backed into the loading dock. Steel Reapers dismounted, moving with military precision to secure the area. Ethan spotted Viper directing operations from the warehouse entrance, while Razor organized the unloading team. Movement on the west side, Daniel reported. Looks like their federal friends are getting nervous. The corrupt agents emerged from the warehouse, badges glinting as they approached the trucks. The moment they reached the first vehicle, the FBI leader's voice crackled. Execute! Spotlights blazed to life, flooding the compound. FBI vehicles roared from concealment, blocking the exits. Federal agents, hands where we can see them! Chaos erupted. Some Steel Reapers surrendered immediately, dropping weapons and raising hands. Others opened fire, diving for cover behind vehicles and crates. The corrupt agents tried to flee but found their escape routes blocked by Cedar Falls volunteers. Viper's voice cut through the chaos. Push through the north gate! We've got backup coming! Ethan moved fast, years of SEAL training taking over. He intercepted Viper's group as they tried to reach their bikes, dropping 2 enforcers with precise strikes. It's over, Viper! Nothing's over! Viper raised his weapon, but Ethan was already moving. A swift disarm, a knee strike, and the gang leader crashed to the pavement. More vehicles appeared, state police responding to Sheriff Morgan's call. The remaining Steel Reapers, seeing their leader down and escape routes blocked, began surrendering. Razor made a final desperate attempt, gunning his bike toward the weakest part of the perimeter. But he found his path blocked by a line of pickup trucks, Cedar Falls citizens standing firm. Clear! The FBI team began securing prisoners. Warehouse is secure. We've got the weapons and the evidence. Ethan zip-tied Viper's wrists as Morgan approached. Town sweep is complete, the sheriff reported. We got their off-site suspects too. It's finished. Not quite, Ethan replied, watching Viper being led away. We still need to make sure nothing like this happens here again. Through his earpiece, he heard Daniel's relieved voice. Cedar Falls is ours again, brother. We did it. Despite the raid's success, one loose end remained. Razor had escaped in the chaos, and Daniel's phone call from the community center was cut short mid-sentence. Ethan's blood ran cold as he raced his truck through Cedar Falls' darkened streets, Sheriff Morgan's cruiser close behind. The community center's parking lot was empty except for Daniel's wheelchair, toppled on its side. Inside, emergency lights cast eerie shadows through the halls. They're in the gym, Morgan whispered, drawing his weapon. I saw movement. Ethan nodded, his SEAL training taking over as he analyzed entry points. 2 ways in. You take the main doors, I'll come through the locker room. Wait for my signal. The locker room was dark, but Ethan moved silently through memorized paths. Through the gym doors, he could hear voices. Your brother's gonna learn about consequences, Razor was saying. About what happens when you mess with the Steel Reapers. He already knows, Daniel's voice remained steady despite his vulnerable position on the gym floor. That's why you lost. Ethan reached the door, peering through. Razor had 3 men with him, all armed. Daniel lay where they'd dumped him, but his eyes were alert, scanning the shadows where he knew his brother would be. Lost? Razor laughed harshly. We've got friends in high places. A few years, maybe less, we'll be back. And this time, there won't be a next time. Ethan's voice carried through the gym as he emerged from the shadows. Drop your weapons. The bikers spun, but Morgan's voice rang from the main entrance. I wouldn't. Federal agents are 2 minutes out. It's over. Over? Razor's face contorted as he pointed his gun at Daniel. I can still make you pay for... He never finished. Ethan moved with lethal precision, crossing the space between them before Razor could squeeze the trigger. A swift strike knocked the gun away. Another dropped Razor to his knees. The other bikers, seeing their leader fall, surrendered to Morgan without a fight. You okay? Ethan helped Daniel back into his chair. Never better, Daniel smiled grimly. Though I think I'm done making solo trips for a while. Razor looked up from the floor, blood trickling from his nose. You don't get it. Men like us, we don't stay down. We always come back. Men like you? Daniel wheeled closer. You're not some unstoppable force. You're just bullies who picked the wrong town. And the wrong family, Ethan added, securing Razor's restraints as federal agents entered the gym. Later, watching the last Steel Reaper being driven away, Morgan turned to the brothers. Town won't be the same after this. No, Daniel agreed, looking at the growing crowd of townspeople gathering to help clean up. It'll be stronger. Ethan squeezed his brother's shoulder. That's what family does. Makes you stronger. The sun was rising over Cedar Falls, marking the end of the Steel Reaper's reign and the beginning of something better. A month after the Steel Reaper's downfall, Cedar Falls was blooming. The warehouse, seized by federal authorities, had yielded enough evidence to arrest corrupt officials in 3 states. But more importantly, the town itself had changed, strengthened by its stand against intimidation. Marie's diner was packed again, the morning crowd spilling onto the sidewalk. Daniel wheeled through the busy tables, accepting handshakes and greetings from people who were no longer just neighbors, but fellow fighters who'd stood together when it mattered. Your usual sugar? Marie's smile was brighter these days. The protection money she'd been forced to pay was being returned, with interest, from seized Steel Reaper assets. Actually, Daniel grinned, make it 2. Ethan's joining me. His brother had extended his leave, helping Sheriff Morgan reorganize the department's training and security protocols. But more than that, Ethan had rediscovered his connection to hometown life. Speaking of your brother, Marie nodded toward the window. Looks like he's got company. Outside, Ethan was deep in conversation with Agent Sarah Chen, the FBI task force leader who'd helped coordinate the raid. She'd been making frequent visits to Cedar Falls, officially to wrap up the investigation, though the townsfolk had other theories. "Town's looking good," Ethan said, joining Daniel with Agent Chen. "The old warehouse is being converted into a community center. Morgan's idea." "Complete with wheelchair accessibility?" Chen added, smiling at Daniel. "The FBI's asset forfeiture program is funding it. Seems fitting, using their money to rebuild what they tried to destroy." Through the window, they could see more signs of renewal. The bakery was reopening with a fresh coat of paint. Jensen's store had new security cameras, donated by grateful customers. Even Mrs. Peterson's flower shop was expanding. "Got the final numbers from the investigation," Chen reported quietly. "The Steel Reapers had operations in 12 states. Cedar Falls was their first real defeat. You started a domino effect that's still going." "The town started it," Daniel corrected. "We just helped finish it." "Speaking of finishing," Ethan said, "I've been thinking. The Navy's offered me a training position at the base up north, 2 hours away." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Close enough for regular visits?" "That's the idea, after everything that happened." Ethan glanced around the diner, at the community that had shown such courage. "Some things are worth staying close to." "Agent Chen's field office is about the same distance," Daniel noted innocently. Both Ethan and Chen suddenly found their coffee cups fascinating, causing Marie to chuckle as she refilled them. Outside, Cedar Falls continued its transformation. The town had learned its own strength, discovered the power of standing together. What the Steel Reapers had intended as a base for crime had instead become a foundation for something far more powerful, a community unafraid to fight for what mattered. The wheelchair basketball game was intense, with Daniel leading his team in the final minutes. The new community center's court, built with recovered Steel Reapers money, echoed with cheers from the packed bleachers. Ethan watched from the sidelines, pride evident on his face as his brother sank the winning shot. After the crowd dispersed, the brothers remained, sharing a quiet moment in the space that had hosted their final confrontation with Razor just 2 months ago. Now, it symbolized something entirely different: healing, growth, and the unbreakable spirit of Cedar Falls. "Remember when we were kids?" Ethan asked, tossing a basketball to Daniel. "That camping trip when I had to fish you out of Miller's Creek?" Daniel caught the ball smoothly, his upper body strength now rival to his brother's. "You've always been there to pull me out of trouble, even when you were halfway around the world." "Not always," Ethan's voice softened. "I wasn't there the night of your accident. But you were there for everything after." Daniel wheeled closer. "The rehabilitation, the dark days, the moments I wanted to give up. You called every day, remember? Even from classified locations. And look at you now, leading the team, helping Morgan organize community security meetings, teaching other wheelchair athletes. You never needed me to save you. You just needed someone to remind you of your own strength." A comfortable silence fell between them, filled with years of shared history and understanding. Through the gym's windows, they could see Cedar Falls bathed in sunset light. Sheriff Morgan was chatting with townspeople outside, his department now a model for community policing. Agent Chen's car was parked nearby. She and Ethan had dinner plans later. "You know what the Steel Reapers never understood?" Daniel said finally. "Strength isn't about intimidation or violence. It's about what you stand for, who you stand with." They thought this town would be an easy target, Ethan agreed. Instead, they gave Cedar Falls a chance to discover its true character. Daniel smiled, remembering the community's transformation. "And gave me a chance to repay my big brother for all those years of protection. This time we fought together." "We always will," Ethan squeezed his brother's shoulder. "Though maybe with less gunfire and corrupt federal agents next time." "Deal." Daniel grinned. "Now go get ready for your date. Agent Chen deserves better than your post-workout look." As Ethan left, Daniel took one final shot. The basketball arced perfectly through the hoop, a motion he'd practiced countless hours to master from his chair. The sound of it swishing through the net echoed through the empty gym, a reminder that limitations only defined you if you let them. Cedar Falls had taught them all that lesson. True strength comes not from power over others, but from standing together, from lifting each other up, from refusing to bow to fear. And for the Wheeler brothers, it had reinforced what they'd always known, that no challenge was too great when faced together.